the last thing we said was that one of the primary aspects of the giving of the Torah was that it wasn't just out of love, but Hashem wanted the relationship also to be out of awe, out of fear. And that was really the point we made at the end of the last class, that the beauty or the greatness of the giving of the Torah was that it was from a level of awe and respect. And as the Baal Shem Tov explained, one of the accomplishments of the primary difference between awe, respect, and love is if it's about me or about other. In other words, because the giving of the Torah was all about awe and respect, therefore it's on God's terms. We didn't make it, and we can't break it. And that was the beauty of the giving of the Torah, even if we're not as pious or as religious or as spiritual or as good as we should be. As much as we have to change and work on ourselves, it doesn't affect our relationship with God. Because it was never about ourself in the relationship, it was about God imposing himself upon us. That was one of the beautiful things the Baal Shem Tov pointed out. So I saw since then two very interesting things that I want to share. One is a conversation that a friend of mine told me about that he heard between two older Hasidic Jews talking. And one of them said that the real sign of an individual in the relationship with God is not somebody who loves God, but somebody who is afraid of God, who has awe, who has respect. Why is awe and respect a greater sign of a relationship? So it's based on a very interesting thing that we mentioned a number of times. Fear only kicks in when you're close to something. Love kicks in even when you're far away, and sometimes especially when you're far away. So if somebody says, oh, I love Hashem, it could mean, not that it does mean, but it could mean that Hashem is very distant from you, and that's why you love him, because you love something even that's distant. To fear Hashem, you have to have it close to you. No one is afraid of things that are far away in time or space. You know, when you have something that is far away from you, you know, whether it is, we could take even the current situation going on, whether it's understanding what someone or person of color goes through, because that is further from a lot of us, it's hard to relate and be afraid of what they're afraid of. And the same thing on the other extreme, someone who's sitting in California or New York where the riots are going on, or the demonstrations that have become violent, it becomes much more of a fear than someone sitting in 200 miles away reading about it in the news. Meaning issues in the world or anything that could cause you fear is only a cause of fear if it's close to you. Therefore, if someone has fear of God, it's much more impressive than if you have love of God. Love of God could be even if God's far from you. I love him. I love my kids when they're far, and sometimes even more when they're far away. I have a great love for them because I miss them. When they're in the house, I love them too, but I feel it more when they're far. Fear is only possible or only felt when something is close. That's one interesting thing. And another thing, and that's connected to why we talk a lot of times about somebody, oh, he is a God-fearing person. Why don't we say he's a God-loving person? That doesn't really bring out the quality of a person as much as God-fearing. When someone is God-fearing, it's much more impressive. We don't even realize it, but that's the fact. If someone says, I love God, you know, any great player that makes a touchdown, makes a beautiful catch, hits a home run, wins a Super Bowl, and go, oh, I love God. But to fear God is a much more self-transformative and self-putting aside idea. Okay, just two things I wanted to share before we begin. Okay, we are ready to begin. V'hinei. So we said in the end of last column in this chapter, the last page, we said, if somebody has a challenge and he cannot bring it down from his intellectual awareness of an emotion into his emotional feeling, meaning in your head, you understand something. In the head, it makes sense why you should fear God. But it doesn't, I don't feel it in my heart. You know, my mind understands, but my heart doesn't feel it. I just don't walk around with a feeling. The Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, said, don't worry about it. Don't worry. And he explained why. Now he's going to tell us something else. The Alter Rebbe is talking to us normal people. When I say normal, I mean normal that we go through all the human challenges. And he says, what if you can't even develop a feeling intellectually? I'm not inspired even intellectually. I can repeat the words. Yes, the meditation is, and I'll think about it as much as I can, that there's a God who is so great, and I am so small, and God puts all of it aside for me, and he looks upon me, and every mitzvah matters, and and you know what? Not only doesn't touch me emotionally, it doesn't even speak to me intellectually. The Alter Rebbe is going to address that. But before we do, I just want to explain what does this mean, like in practical sense. So anyone here who is a mother or a grandmother, or if you're an aunt or an uncle, but if you're a mother or grandmother, you could relate to this concept, and that is when your child has just fallen asleep and goes to bed, and you get a chance to sit down and do stuff in the house, and after an hour or two, you decide, I'm going to sleep, and you fall into a good sleep, and suddenly the child wakes up screaming and crying, wants either to eat something, wants to go downstairs and play, or wants to do something. For a lot of parents, unless you're a brand new parent and the child's like 2 months old, okay, that's different. But if your child's a toddler, it's not exciting to get up and you don't feel emotionally the love of the parent at that moment. Oh, I love parenting. It's so, you might not feel it in your heart, but in your head, you know this is what love means. I get up and take care of my child. Then you can have a thing where you don't feel it emotionally, because at that moment, it's much easier to feel the emotion when the kid's sitting in the kitchen with a crayon, drawing a picture and smiling, with his tongue sticking out. And then you could look, oh, I feel in my heart the love here. At 2 a.m. when the child gets up, your brain tells you this is love, but your heart might not feel naturally because you're a human being, and your desire for getting some sleep and getting some rest at night overwhelms your emotions, but it doesn't affect you intellectually. There are certain times you won't feel this as a parent, because any healthy parent could never disconnect intellectually from this. But as Jews, we are humans, and sometimes we could even lack the intellectual connection to understand why we have to get up and in the morning and daven shachar, put on tefillin, light a Shabbos candle, eat kosher, make a blessing, refrain from doing certain things. So yes, parenting, I hope every healthy parent will always have in their head that knowledge, even if they're not feeling it because they're going through some emotional struggles of wanting to sleep, or other examples that happen in the house, or the stress of a day, which is normal. But there is a difference between intellectually knowing and feeling the love. In my mind, my love is there, and therefore I'm getting up. I'm not going to know my child's crying. That's the fact. And emotionally feeling it to actually, like I said, the first week that you have a child, the first month, the first 2 months, depends on each person. It's actually, you wake up with a smile, the delightful excitement that your child's here, and you wake up and you take care of them, and you can hum a tune while you're changing them or making them a bowl of cereal at 2 a.m. But the feeling you might not have, but you'll always have it in your head. That's the difference we said before. Now we're saying, what if I don't have it intellectually? My mind doesn't speak to me. You're talking to me. You're telling me about God. You're telling me God's here. It means nothing to me as far as stimulation. Not because I'm not intellectual or intelligent. Not because I'm not smart. I can't relate to it. Why not? Let's see why not. And the Alter Rebbe is going to address this. By the way, the fact that the Alter Rebbe is addressing this in Tanya, it means such a behavior is normal for a Jew to feel. Because he doesn't talk about here how to deal with the wicked people. He's talking about what's called a Beinoni, the normal person who struggles and wants to be good. And that's who we're talking about here. Even if there's somebody who not just emotionally doesn't feel the stimulation and the feeling of love through this meditation. But you say, I tried the meditation in chapter 41. I went through all the motions. I spent 20 minutes thinking about this. Doesn't talk to me. Why? And he said he doesn't feel both the shame or the respect. I don't feel anything. I don't even in my head relate to it. Why? And this is very interesting. He says, this is not your fault. This is not your fault. He says, don't feel bad. Why not? It has to do with your soul. Every single soul has another journey where it comes from. How it's carved out of God's chair. It says there's the pre-mortal man. There's a giant man of souls. There are some souls that come from the brain, some souls that come from the foot, some come from the toes. And by the way, sometimes you find someone who's a very creative person. It might come from this part, emotional person comes from the heart. There's the giant man of God, where each soul is taken from. Some souls come from very active people. They come from the arms. Some are doers and goers. They come from the feet. Some are the kidneys. They're all different expressions where spiritually you come from. Some come from the toes. Some come from the toes, the bottom of the toes. Meaning, in other words, not because you're not a good soul, you're not a good person. The nature of your soul comes from a very low place. And what does the word low mean by a soul? Is it a soul? Is it godly or not? The difference between one soul and another soul, when we say if higher or lower, we're talking about sensitivity. Every single soul is holy and no less or more holy than the other. The soul of Moses and the soul of every person in this group here, all are part of God and all are 1,000% holy, and one person can't be more Jewish or less Jewish. What you could have is a sensitivity. There are some people, even while living in this physical world, eating breakfast every day, they are completely unattracted to the material and in tune to the spiritual. The real great giant souls, the real sensitive souls, feel godliness and see godliness and are completely spiritual. They have no attraction. It means nothing to them. There's a famous story about the second Rebbe of the Hasidic dynasty, the Maggid of Mezrich, that somebody came into his home. A wealthy businessman came to travel to visit him for a blessing. And he comes, his name is the Maggid of Mezrich. Hi, Zalman. And this person looks, and the Maggid had a simple wooden table, 2 wooden chairs, and a straw mattress. And that was all the furniture in the house. And he says to the Maggid, "Where's all your furniture? Where's all your stuff?" So the Maggid says to him, "Where's your furniture? Where's all your furniture? Where's all your belongings? Where's all your fancy beds?" He said, "Rabbi, I'm traveling. I'm on a journey. I don't take it with me. I take the bare necessities." He says, "I'm traveling too. I'm on a journey too. Back home in heaven, I have all my necessities." To be in that state of mind is a whole different place. That means his soul was completely in tune to the reality of godliness and spirituality, and the material is just a journey. That is what it means, a special high soul. That's a sensitivity thing. The difference between parts of your body as far as being alive, your toe is as live as the skin on your forehead or your neck or your hand. The difference is how sensitive it is. You could walk on something bumpy, a little more uneven or rough with your toes, and you don't feel it. Why? Because there's a lack of sensitivity there, which is healthy the way God designed us. Some parts of our body are less sensitive because they're supposed to come in contact with rougher materials, and some are more sensitive. But the reality is there are different types of souls in their sensitivity. And if you don't have the ability to become inspired, it's not a flaw in you. You're not doing something wrong. That's how God designed you. It's not a flaw of the toe to be less sensitive. That's how a toe was made, like the famous line. You can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree because fish don't climb trees, squirrels do. So you can't say that your soul or yourself is a bad or flawed. No, you were designed with a particular mission with this type of soul. But the reality is your soul is less sensitive. Your soul is less touched, meaning less easily touched by experiences. You can have 2 people go to the same experience in Shul and Rosh Hashanah, or go into a davening or watch something happen, and one person becomes emotional and touched, and one person goes, it doesn't speak to me. Why? Because of sensitivity. The Alter Rebbe says the reason why you're having trouble from this meditation is not because necessarily you're meditating wrong or you're not doing your part. It's because your soul is a much more coarse soul. How is a soul coarse? So we know from the chapter 2 of Tanya that there's 2 primary factors. When a soul comes down from heaven, the soul comes through a journey. Some souls are called souls of Atzilus, or souls of very high levels, because they transport from the highest worlds down to this world with no difficulty. Like a person traveling from here to Australia in this new first-class cabin, where you're sitting literally in a room with a recliner, with a bed, your own air conditioning system, and the finest, Bose earphones, and you get there refreshed, and you just had a fresh glass of orange juice, and you come off the plane refreshed. And someone else took the milk run, 12 stops on the back of a cargo plane with chickens, and he arrives at the destination after 82 hours of traveling, exhausted and tired. You say, 1 second, you guys both came from the same place. One took the express train, the express ride with comfort, and one took a bumpy ride. Souls come down to this world as a journey. They stop on the way they come. By the time they arrive here, there's a lot of things that affect the souls, and that's when you consider the soul starting from the same place. But even within that, souls also have in Atzilus, the highest level, the brain of the soul, the heart of the soul, the foot of the soul. So that's first of all, the soul itself is affected by the journey and where it comes from. In addition, we know when the parents create a child in the moment of intimacy, their sensitivity to spirituality and to each other has a huge impact on the sensitivity of the soul. If there's a coarseness or a lack of sensitivity going on at that time also affects the soul. So various things can affect the soul. That being said, says the Alter Rebbe, if you're having trouble becoming in tune to your meditation or being inspired by it, not just emotionally, but even intellectually, it's because of your soul, that the way it's come down here, not only did it come through the world of Atzilus and down to Beria, down to Yetzirah, and down to Asiya. In Asiya, each world itself, we have 10 levels. We have Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. Your soul comes from the lowest level of the lowest world. And therefore, you're doing nothing wrong. You were given this. Some people, it's amazing. They very easily gain weight. Some people can never gain weight. Some people are fast runners. Some are tall, some are short. All the color of your skin and the nature of your character, a lot of these things are nature. Not all of it's nurture. A big part of it is nature. And therefore, you were born this way. So he says, first of all, you were given this gift. You were given this type of soul. So it's not a flaw of your behavior, your efforts, or your dedication, or your spiritual journey. It's you started with a much more challenging material. Why God gives one person an easier role or a harder role, that depends on your mission in this world. Excuse me. Every soul has a mission. We know in the swimming pool, some people are swimming, some people are lifeguards. The lifeguards, hopefully, are excellent swimmers, and they're not here to swim. They're here to help those people who are having trouble swimming. Every person, every bro has a different job. Your job is not to be a tzaddik. Your job is to be someone, as we said earlier in chapter 24, 25, 26, not to be depressed in life if you do a number of sins or you fail in a lot of areas, because maybe that's your job. Just tell you a message. I'll call him back. So it could be your job in life is a struggle. That's many people, let's say 99% of the population of the Jewish world, their mission in life is to struggle and overcome challenges. That's what God wants. As you mentioned, the two different types of food. You have foods that are naturally sweet, and foods that become sweet and delicious only by being prepared properly. But that's the famous story of Isaac and his desire that Esav should bring the offering, and ended up bringing from Jacob. What did he want from Esav? He knew if Esav, who was a sinner, could do something good, the joy that God will have would be tremendous. It's like taking an onion that naturally tastes not so pleasant and make it taste delicious by frying it properly, preparing it with raw meat that naturally doesn't taste good, but properly prepared to taste delicious. As a matter of fact, the main course is not the ice cream that tastes naturally sweet, but the food that was prepared with a lot of effort. Take the ginger, the garlic, the onions, and prepare them together and make a delicious dish. That is much more pleasurable to God. Not the sweet natural sugar, so to speak. But in any case, that's why you're having a challenge, says the Alter Rebbe. But he says, together with that, don't be dejected. And he's going to say something beautiful now about all of our journeys in life. Nevertheless, since your intention is, what did you try and do just now? You sat down and said to yourself, I'm going to meditate on chapter 41's instructions. I'm going to think about the greatness of God. I'm going to think about how insignificant I am and how God puts everything aside just to look at me and see, am I going to go and make the blessing after I eat this food? Am I going to bench? Am I going to avoid doing this particular sin? Am I going to make an effort to go and do this mitzvah? Now, what did you just do? You just made a conscious effort to serve God. So he says, since what was your intention? Your intention was a service to serve the king, to serve God. This is still a big, full mitzvah. Why? Because there are two separate commandments. Commandment number one, the mitzvah to serve God, and commandment number two, the mitzvah to fear God, to have this level of respect and awe. And even if you're failing in one area, I tried my best, I couldn't do it. You know what? Trying is not just, if I tried to make the train, I don't get credit for making the train. I didn't make the train, but I get the credit for trying. But you know what? Making the train, trying didn't help. Wanting to didn't help. But in Jewish life, trying is part of service. One mitzvah is to try, called Aveda, serve God. There's a second mitzvah to actually fear God. So first of all, he says your mitzvah of serving God is there. It's, there's a difference. There's an interesting thing in relationships that the thought counts. If you want to do something for a technical thing, the thought doesn't make a difference. If you had best intentions to take your medication, you didn't take it, doesn't count. But in relationships, the fact that I wanted to buy you a gift, I went to the store, and they were out. That means you actually went and you care about me and you made me a priority and you did something for me. That's called service of God. In a relationship, you can call it love, you can call it dedication. In technical terms, as a mitzvah, it's called avodas Hashem. Serving, there's a mitzvah to serve God. So maybe you didn't succeed in fearing God, but you succeeded in serving God. You went and spent time meditating and trying. That is a mitzvah within itself. That's the first thing. So don't feel bad. You got the mitzvah. There are 613 commandments. One is called serving God. One is called fearing God, with two separate commandments. And therefore, you may have missed out on fearing God, but you didn't miss out on serving God. Meaning you may have not developed the intellectual and emotional feelings that are part of fear, part of awe. You thought about it, and you're as cold and unimpressed as before. Nevertheless, you have done the mitzvah of serving God. And now he's going to tell you the cool part. He says, but you know what? You also did the mitzvah of fearing God. He says, because let's analyze what is fear of God. And this is now going to be the point of the next couple lines here. A very fantastic assessment of now, what does fearing God mean? What does it mean to have respect? What does it mean to have fear? There's a very interesting reality in Jewish life, in the giving of the Torah, that a lot of people don't know about, but it's a very fascinating concept. And what is that? Before God gave the Torah, there was something, if you wanted to get married, you just took a woman or you took a man and you got together and it was a relationship. When God gave the Torah, he created a sanctified relationship. And that is why today, when someone asks about the question of marriage, marriage could only be between a man and a woman, and only between a man and a woman who are not brother and sister, and only between the same as Jewish people. Why? We're not getting into if you have feelings and all the other things. The question is, you want a relationship to be holy? Is one way to do it. You want to marry somebody? Do whatever you want. But you want it to be a holy relationship, Kiddushin. Kiddushin, like Kiddush, means holy. To be a holy relationship, there's only one way to do holy. You can have a relationship any way you want, and that could be beautiful in your life. And no one's challenging that. But you want a holy relationship is only the way God said. And how did God define this holy relationship? A very interesting component. He broke up the marriage into two parts, called Kiddushin and Isuin. Today we don't see it so much, because today everything happens under the chuppah. But really under the chuppah, if you ever noticed the reading of the Ksubah, that was an invention by Rashi, 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago. Why do you read the Ksubah? Not an invention of Rashi. The Ksubah was an invention 1,000 years before Rashi. That was a guarantee to make the husband, just to give a little background. The Ksubah wasn't invented by the rabbis because, biblically speaking, it's very easy for a man to divorce a woman. A man can divorce a woman just because he's unsatisfied. The rabbi said that's not a healthy relationship for people who are, people who are very holy. The relationship is serious. But as you become more coarse as time went by, people become a little more in tune to their own needs, and they might be easily decide, I'm divorcing my wife because I'm mad at her today. The rabbi said, you know what, we're making a ksubah. Ksubah is a protection device for the woman that you pay a large sum of money if you try and divorce her, which means that's what it really is. To take the relationship serious. It was to avoid, God forbid, someone taking the relationship lightly. Okay, that's just the background what the ksubah is. The ksubah is a protection for the wife. Nowadays, they made a gzeira that the wife has the same, 1,000 years ago, they changed the rules. The times are even around the time of Rashi, really. They changed the rules that a woman and the man have the same rights in a divorce, and both have to be agreeing, and both have the right to request it. It used to be only the husband could request it originally, but that already for 1,000 years is equal power in a marriage. So the ksubah is one of the things that affected that, and also other enactments. So why do we read the ksubah at the wedding? What's the importance of reading it? They needed to make a break between the two halves of the wedding. Under the chuppah, there's two separate events taking place. There's an engagement and there's a marriage. What we call engagement today is not really engagement. That's called the commitment. In Yiddish, we say it's a vart. I'm giving my word to get married. Engagement is putting the ring on your spouse's finger. But when a man puts the ring on the woman's finger, that is a biblical engagement called kiddushin. It's called sanctifying her, or in the terms of the rabbis, called erisin, making her forbidden to everybody else. And as we'll see in a minute. And nisuin is really the chuppah. The chuppah is the nisuin. That's the second half of the wedding. We make the 7 blessings. So if you watch carefully, next time you go to a wedding, you'll see the rabbi first makes one blessing on the kiddushin, and they put the ring on the finger. Then they take a break. They read the ksuba just as an interruption to make a break, and there's a whole reading of the ksuba and some speeches. The second half of the wedding is the actual marriage, which is the saying of the 7 blessings, and the chuppah does that. Some say it's the chuppah, some say it's the veil, some say it's going to the yichud room. Okay, that's just technicalities and how to create the chuppah. But that's the engagement and the marriage. Until a couple hundred years ago, they took place anywhere from 2 months to 12 months apart. It was not right away. Most times there's a break of between a few months and usually about 12 months break between the kiddushin, you're now engaged, and then the marriage took place 11, 12 months later. What was this period about? This was a time for the woman to get ready for the marriage, to start planning her marriage and getting ready emotionally and mentally and practically and technically. What was a technical relationship? If one of them wanted to break off the marriage at that time, it requires an actual divorce. They are 100% married. So why aren't they called married? Because they're not allowed to have intimate relations and move in with each other. They cannot become one yet. So this idea of kiddush with nesuin seems like a ridiculous idea. You're married, you are a couple, but you can't have any pleasure from each other in a physical way. You can't even move into the same house yet. Why is this done? And by the way, the blessing we say under the chuppah is we made forbidden for us those who are only engaged. That makes it permitted to us once we become married. So this period, this 10, 12 months period, was the invention, one of the inventions of the giving of the Torah. That God now made a new 2-step marriage. What was the point of that? The point of that was to explain the foundation of a marriage. When 2 people are together, you're together because of love, and you're together because we each get something out of this relationship. I'm getting something special. I feel good. I am made happy. I am enjoying our personal physical relationship. There's the benefits that it gets from the marriage. In the engagement, there is no benefits. What's the relationship? Restrictions, respect. I can't be with anybody else. I can't be with her. It is a time to appreciate the person, not what you get from the person, but just because of who the person is. And if you think about this, this is one of the great ideas of a relationship, is to be involved not because I benefit from this relationship, but because I give to this relationship. I respect this relationship. And that is really what we're talking about here in this idea of yira. When we talk about fear, we're talking about the invention of a relationship that has no benefits for me. That's really the ultimate definition of awe of God, respect of God. I'm here not for self, but for other. I am in this relationship. Someone says, so how's married life? Well, I haven't been married yet. What do you mean? You got engaged, you get the ring, we have the wedding is coming up in the 10 months. What's this period about? Creating the relationship of respect for each other. That's the foundation. In a healthy marriage for younger people, there's anyway, because of the laws of family purity, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 days a month, that you anyway keep this sort of concept. And again, that recreates and strengthens the relationship where there's no intimacy, but there is respect and appreciation of the person outside of what you get from the person. Just appreciating the person, who they are, and not what you get from the relationship. So let's say this now. Now knowing that, let's see what he says, how we really do have fear in, even if you think, I didn't get intellectually stimulated, I didn't get emotionally stimulated. So first he said, don't worry, because you did service, you did an effort, you worked hard, that's serving God. You got up, you went, and you tried your best, that's serving God. He said, truthfully, you also fulfilled the mitzvah of yira. Why? I want to come to one of the very famous stories in history. Truth to be told, you're also fulfilling the mitzvah of awe. Why? That you're trying to draw down into your mind and into your feeling fear of God. During those moments, when you were trying hard, I know it didn't have a lasting effect. It's like, it says the effect of a ship on the ocean after the waves are gone, you don't see any effect of it. But while the ship was passing, there was a wake. There was a wake that was there. When it's gone, I don't see any benefit of what happened. There's no mark in the water. There's no sign where the ship was. The water returned to its calm. But while the ship was there a ripple? While you were thinking the thoughts of attempting to generate fear, you did, on some level, have fear of God. At least you had the thought of a fear of God, it touched you at least in the way you fear another person. What does that mean? Well, let's go 2 more lines first. We'll see what that means, and then we'll go back and explain this. He says there's really 2 types of fear that we're going to see. One type of fear is called an elevated fear, which is the fear of the awesomeness of a person. You're standing before a king, and I'm just feeling full of awe. You're standing before your mentor from college, your college professor, who is a great, respected individual, and you watch how you speak. Then there's the feeling of awe because someone else is watching. Someone's looking. One of the best examples, we have Zoom things. I am on Zoom meetings 2-3 times a day for different things. Some are important, some are not important. There are many times I shut off my camera. Why? I'm not doing anything as shameful. I might want to scratch my beard, blow my nose. I might want to, when someone else is watching, I do things differently. It could be my kids coming over to me, or I want to tell them go away. There are many, many behaviors we will not do if someone else is watching. Not because I'm afraid of you. Not because I'm afraid and I have such tremendous awe and respect for other people, which I should have. It's because when someone else is watching, you don't burp, hopefully. You don't do certain things. You don't scratch yourself. There's a certain behavioral ethics that kick in as human beings, as healthy people, when someone else is watching. When you are thinking of those moments of trying to develop a fear of God, you at least kicked in that level. By the way, what's the difference between if a king is watching or not? Just so you know. When the king is there, you don't even think of doing something wrong. It doesn't even enter your mind to do it. When you're standing before the king, you don't have to tell yourself, okay, don't scratch yourself, someone's watching. You're in awe. When someone else is there, you will consciously tell yourself, I'm not going to scratch my nose now because I'm sitting by the table with guests. I'm not going to, do this. I'm not going to scratch the inside of my ear. You might have done it 5 minutes ago when you were walking home from the shul. You know what? Back in the day when you walked the shul. But the reality is your behavior changes when someone else is watching. This is what the Alter Rebbe says. There's another level of fear of God and awe of God, not because you're afraid of getting punished. You don't act because of being punished. You act this way because there's awareness of a God. That is a very powerful level of fear of God. You change your conduct because of this awe. He says at least that you accomplish when you're thinking about it. While you have that meditation going on, you without question reach this level. Without question, you tap into it. And therefore, you should not think that I didn't arouse fear. I did fear. I did fear on a very basic level, but as we'll see in a minute, it is not basic at all. We'll see in 1 minute, we'll finish with this thought for today. It's not basic at all. As a matter of fact, this behavior will keep you from sinning. If you would imagine the presence of God, not like some king, not like some great man, but like Mr. Goldberg. Imagine Mr. Goldberg walked into your house right now. If you had the basic decency and awareness of God, like you have from Mr. Goldberg, nothing exciting, nothing fantastic, nothing amazing, just like he's there, that would be impressive beyond impressive. And where do we see this? We see She'omar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was one of the 80 students of Hillel. Hillel had 80 famous students. The greatest was Bejonis ben Uziel, who, by the way, was so great that when he studied Torah, a bird would not fly over them because if they did, they would get singed. There was fire actually coming from him. When he studied Torah, he was so great. Bejonis ben Uziel. And the smallest was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who, by the way, has the most impact on our lives than anybody we know in many, many ways. Many laws and things that we do today are all because of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the great, great sages. Again, the least of all these 80 students, but tremendously great, one of the greatest of history. He was passing away. He passed away at 120 years old. He's one of the few people who lived to 120. And on his deathbed, his students came over to him and said, Rebbe, can you give us some guidance, some advice, some instruction before you die? So he said to them, may it be the will of God. May you be lucky enough to fear God as much as you fear another human being. And they said to him, Rebbe, what do you mean? We're talking about some lofty level, some big thing. We want to reach some great level. He said, my friends, Tedu, my students, when someone else is about to do something sinful or wrong, he always says to himself, I hope no one's watching. If there's anybody who is ever going to do something a little immoral, unethical, inappropriate, they're not going to do it in front of someone else. If no one else is watching, they'll do it. Hopefully, they wouldn't do it even if no one's watching. But the guy who has no shame to sin in front of others is a very, very low, despicable creature. Even people in this world that are immoral and unethical and robbers and thieves, most of them will do it in a way where nobody sees. They're ashamed to show someone else. Everyone can have moments of imperfection, of failure, or sin, but each person who has those flaws and those momentary moments of weakness will make sure nobody's watching, because in front of someone else you don't want to show your weakness. So he says, I wish that your conduct would be that you'll refrain from certain behaviors, just like if somebody was in the room. Imagine if you considered God's presence as effective in your conduct as someone else sitting in the room right now. How many times a person considered not doing or doing something, he said, no, it's not nice. People are watching. I'll stay by the table and I'll bench. Or I'll make the blessing. I'll wash your bread. I'll do this. Because we're human. We always act to drop better in front of other people. How low we'll go with no one watching and how low we'll go in front of other people is a barometer that moves according to each person. But all of us have a notch up in front of other people. Not because we're fake. Not because we're shallow. There is a certain shallowness, but that's not because we're shallow. It's because we have a standard of menschlichkeit that we know such a behavior I should be ashamed of, and I shouldn't do it, or it's not nice, or it's disrespectful, or it's inappropriate. And actually, this is called a very low level of fear. This is called a lower level, and that's what we're gonna get into the higher level next chapter. So what we're talking about here, I'm just checking if I want to cover any other things before we come to close this. Yeah, so in other words, we're coming now, and he's really saying two reasons why this fear still counts as fear. Number one, because on a certain level, that is fear. And I'll tell you a short story that will make this point. I remember, and I wasn't at the Farbrengen when the Rebbe said this, but the Rebbe said the story, and I heard the recording of it. It's a very nice story. It was a particular Jew who was quite well off and owned a boat, a yacht, and was on the boat. And he asked the captain which direction is, I guess the captain was new, that's why he followed up the next question. He asked the captain which direction is east. And the captain says, don't worry, I know where I'm going. He says, no, I have to say a prayer. And when I pray, explain my prayer. I gotta face east when I pray. So the Rebbe says, afterwards, the captain told him that later he was thinking about prayer too. He never got around to praying, but he was thinking about it. At the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, thinking about prayer is also a prayer. Meaning, when you're thinking about something, it's also part of it. If you're thinking about your love for your child, even if you don't develop it right, it's thinking about a feeling is also the feeling itself. So thinking about fear is also fear. But in addition, thinking about it actually affects your behavior. Someone who does it without a question will act differently for those moments or for a long time or a short time, depending on you. In other words, you not only fulfill the mitzvah, says the Alter Rebbe. He says, I know I'm talking to, I know we're not naturally spiritual. Many of us have souls that are not as sensitive as other people's souls. So if you're not developing for this meditation a feeling, even intellectually, don't feel bad. Because first of all, you're working on yourself, and that's a service. And second of all, you have on some level achieved fear, but this is all the lower level of fear. This is a fear that could be compared to the awe you feel standing in front of a king. This is more of a respect and a feeling of appropriate behavior, recognizing the presence of God. We'll stop here. I just want to tell you a story, which is a very interesting story, but it also tells you about understanding the relationship with us and God. Hopefully the story will be appreciated. The Alter Rebbe lived at a time, he passed away in 1812, so he lived in the late 1700s and the beginning of 1800s. And at that time, it was a very common thing to have something called a Maggid. A Maggid's job was he'd come to town and criticize people. That's what he would do. And you paid him for that. Could you come to our town and criticize us? Now we discourage such behavior. The Rebbe once told a principal came to the Rebbe and said, people tell me I'm too nice and I too complimentary to the kids, I should be a little stricter. The Rebbe told him, this is going back 50 years ago, so imagine today. This generation of youth is so self-critical, they need no assistance. What they need is love. Give them compliments and positive encouragement. They don't need any criticism. This generation, they criticize themselves enough. But in any case, but 200 years ago, it was very common to pay a person and come, and sometimes you get a private meeting. You come to your house and tell you what's wrong with you. Why didn't you? Businesses hire people nowadays to do it to help you fix up your businesses. But people's characters, we are emotionally too fragile for this. But that was the thing. So the Maggid in that town came and he gave all the speeches. But of course, he would never talk to the Alter Rebbe with any. This guy was an ethical person. Some of them were real pieces of work. People who enjoyed criticizing others, and they got a lot of reproach. But this guy was a good man. So the Alter Rebbe calls him in, and he says, "Hello, you came to town. We paid you for services, but you never gave me any critique." So he looks at the Alter Rebbe. He says, "Alter Rebbe says, no, tell me. I also want to be given a little critique." So he says to the Alter Rebbe, he's a very smart guy. He said, "Rebbe," he said, "whatever I know, you know. Whatever you don't know, I don't know. The difference between us is only the stuff that you know and I don't know. But you should know the difference between what I know and what you know is much, much smaller than the difference between what you know and you don't know." In other words, a tzaddik, this is based on the idea of yira. The closer you get to God, the more you realize how much you don't know and how far God is from you. How far God is from you. When you're far away from somebody, you can say, yeah, he's not as smart as me, or he's a little smarter than me. When you come to somebody and you realize their greatness, man, someone who was so close to God like the Alter Rebbe realized how far he was away. And this point of telling him that you should know the difference between what me and you know is much smaller. The difference between you know and you don't know, meaning between you and the unlimited. And the Alter Rebbe started crying and told him thank you. It was a way to remind himself of how small we are before God. And this is the Alter Rebbe, the author of this book that we're reading right here, the Chabad. I mean, the awareness of how small we are, that's off. That's fear. To remind us to recognize that which we stand before is so much greater than us, yet he is so interested in us. We'll stop here. We want to wish everyone a beautiful, beautiful day. The weather outside is gorgeous, especially by Bel-Ann. We can actually see the Hawaii feeling. And hopefully we'll see everybody back Wednesday, next week, back to regular Wednesday. And hopefully 10 o'clock. And everyone have a great day.
Thank
you, Moshe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good
It
one.
was wonderful.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, you as well. Enjoy your day.
Hi, Linda.
Bye.
Bye.